Well, hello again, Dr. Dusten. How you doing today?
I'm good. You caught me drinking water.
Oh, good.
It's good. I need to hydrate. I need to hydrate for our conversations, Brian.
Well,
I'm
yes, you
good.
do.
How are you?
Great. We have a lot to talk about today with digestion. We're going to kind of dive a little deeper into some of the aspects of how digestion and training kind of are connected. We were just talking before the call about all the different aspects of hypertrophic and metabolic stimulus and neurostimulus and how they affect uh, digestion, and then also some of the finer points that you have that you want to give the audience to have them maybe think about if they have digestion problems or if they don't know they have digestion problems, some of the things that actually would probably maybe bring them back to a centerpiece or a center point to help just the body be better. So, would you like to start and dive into that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually a very good topic. So I know we were talking about in our last call, we were talking about the importance of digestion and how a lot of people, most people have some level of digestive distress, or maybe not even distress. That's just it's less than optimal. And that we really want it's crucial, right, for our energy creation. Um, but ultimately, because when we're in the gym, and you mentioned a couple of big words, you mentioned some $1,000 words there, right? Hypertrophic and metabolic. Oh my gosh, I need to buy a vowel.
I need to
So
find new words. Yes.
yeah. Muscle building, fat loss. I
Thank
mean, for
you.
the most part, that's yeah. You're welcome. Yeah, I went to school for 10 years, so I could say so I could learn those too. Um, I do agree with you though. In most cases, um, because you have your speed athletes and your performance people who just really they're all about performance. But even in working with those folks whose job literally is to go fast, right, or
Yep.
to pick up heavy things, they still want to look good and they still want to feel good. And for the most part, people that you work with that are not professional athletes, they generally want to look better and feel better. And so we are manipulating uh, training. We put them in the gym.
Yep.
We train them. We put weights, have them lift weights, and we have them do cardio. We have them eat a certain way, all with the intention that we're going to help them look better and feel better. And so what we're really doing is we're really manipulating variables to achieve outcomes.
Yep.
And the biggest variable or the biggest mechanism that we're manipulating when it comes to use in the gym is stress. We're forcing adaptations to stress. So if I go in the sun and I get stressed by the sun, then I get a tan, right? I build a tan. And when I go in the gym, I build calluses. When I go in the gym, well, kind of. I mean, muscles are calluses. If we lift weight in a certain way and we break it down and we build it back up, we're effectively using stress to make our muscles bigger or make them stronger, or
Yep.
taxing the metabolic system in a way where we underfeed it and we overstress it for a period of time to achieve weight loss or fat loss. And
Yep.
so I think in most cases, I would think that the people that you're working with are going to be focused on those outcomes as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And where I think this conversation we were having about energy becomes super important is that because we're stressing people, we've got to make sure that they're in a position where they can handle that stress to
Hmm.
achieve that outcome. Because if they don't, if they're not, well, then we're just going to make them feel worse. And then they're going to get really frustrated because they can't achieve it. And so this is where the use of the Eastern and functional medicine concepts can become really empowering, because there's any number of things that people can do and evaluate on themselves that will help them better understand where they are. And the areas from Eastern medicine that we use uh, are things like the pulse, right? And we use things like the tongue. We'll go back through this, but things like the tongue,
Sure.
digestion, which is what we were talking about, right? Your ability
Yep.
to fall asleep and stay asleep, and then a little known one, which is your spirit or your emotional affect. And when you think about this, Uh, your pulse has various qualities. This is controlled by your nervous system, so the speed of your pulse and the pressure of your pulse and the volume of your blood. Uh, if if we have too high a pressure, if we have too low a pressure, if we don't have enough blood volume, these are all indications that things are not optimal in either our blood building um, ability or our nervous system.
Yep.
Okay. And so if your pressure is too high or too low and you tax somebody, well, that could make it worse.
Yep.
And if you don't have enough blood volume, and this is something we see more with women than men, um, perhaps we should spend some time bringing up your nutrients and bringing improving digestion because maybe you're actually eating enough, but it's not actually getting into the cell, right? And so,
Yep.
how are we to then, if we are going to tax this person, do it in good conscience if the person's nervous system can't handle it and their blood production can't handle it? Uh, but I think the big building concept that we had talked about from our last call on digestion really starts to intersect with this discussion because there's certainly signs and symptoms that you can look for in the tongue and in the digestion that really come into play here. So when you think about we talked last time about the gastric acid, right? So like the stomach juice.
Yep.
And when you have, when you don't have enough of that, it can create some undigested food in your stool. It can create, some epigastric and hypogastric pain. Gastroesophageal reflux, the GERD, these types of things. Not always just because you have too much acid. It actually may be just dysfunction, right, or not enough. But those things can be expressed in the tongue coat.
I see.
So if you think about this, a good proper bacterial and acidic balance in your stomach, you should have just a normal, very light pink tongue coat. Okay. But when you start to notice like that tongue coat getting greasy, it feels what we call turbidity, or it looks like it's like white and fuzzy. These
Yep.
are often signs that we don't have the proper bacterial and acidic balance in our stomach. And that could be a sign of opportunity for us, before we really push on this person to try to bring up and support their digestion, right?
Yep. Yep.
And certainly before anybody tries to, build muscle or lose fat, we want to pay attention to those things because they can be signs that things aren't optimal. But it goes beyond just what's going on in the stomach. Obviously, we've talked, and most people will notice that they have maybe some bloating or distension going on. And sometimes you don't, right? Sometimes people don't notice that they actually have that, or that happens more frequently and more severely than they want to admit.
Yep.
Those things are pretty, that's intestinal, so that's lower digestive, right?
Yep. Hmm.
And sometimes people uh, will notice that, and other times they won't. But also, what's produced down there in that lower intestinal area? What else do we make down there that might have an impact on that
Serotonin.
personality? Uh,
Serotonin. Yeah.
it's right. It's your neurotransmitters.
Yep.
So when we start to look at some of those other variables, which are, we talked about the spirit, we talked about the emotional affect, and then also your ability to go to sleep, we have to consider what's going on digestively because most of your serotonin is made in your intestinal tract, as are other neurotransmitters that can affect your mood. So if we have mood imbalances like anxieties and depressions and those types of things. Now, in every case, you're not going to take away and completely stop someone from being, in a depressive
Anxious.
state,
Yep.
simply, yeah, or anxious simply because you're like, oh, your intestines are a little angry. But it is a factor. Okay. It is a factor. And so if we're looking at these things and saying, hey, where are we on that, anxiety and depression scale? How severe, how frequent? Do we have any mood swings and disorders, those types of things? Are we dealing with intestinal distension? And then also, how is our sleep? Because one of the pathways that we see sleep disruption present is through the conversion or lack thereof of serotonin to melatonin. Okay, and
Mm.
since most of our serotonin's made in our intestinal tract, if we happen to be low on serotonin and not sleeping, well, then it could be a two birds, one stone type situation. And the reason that we want to talk about this and evaluate it is that if we're going to push somebody at a caloric deficit, if we're going to put someone in a position where we're going to break their muscles down and create a lot more stress in the system and inflammation, then we want to make sure that they're not already dealing with a great deal of psychological stress, that they're not already dealing with a great deal of intestinal or gastric inflammation, right?
Okay.
That they're not already demonstrating signs of distress in those areas, because as good coaches, our job is to help people feel better
Yep.
through our training, not make them feel worse. And so looking at a couple of these key indicators, your blood pressure, your heart rate, your blood volume, looking at your HRV, the heart rate variability, keeping an idea of how that tongue coat is looking and making sure it's not too greasy or too turbid, making sure that we don't have a lot of gastrointestinal distress, either through bloating, distension, undigested food in the stool, urgency, right? And then making sure that the person's reasonably falling asleep and staying there, right? Is all the things we want to pay attention to and get at least above an 80% threshold
Okay.
before we beat them up pretty good in the gym and focus on either building their muscles or helping them reduce their fat.
I see. Well, one of the things that I've recognized over the last, well, I guess same with you with 20 years, I just didn't have the knowledge to kind of back it up was when I worked at the place with Stefan and all them, right, that I would get a lot of the CEO people that, yes, they had all the money to pay for our training. That even we'd put them on lots of supplements too. And it just never seemed right within the training that we'd put them on. So naturally, with your and my background, German body composition, all these other things. And I started thinking to myself, and I'm not, I'm not an outlier here, but I was like, how do I make this better for them? Because the part, that part of their life wasn't changing. The stress
Mm-hmm.
from the kids, the stress from the work. I trained the CEO of Emerson. There's a couple other things that are going on that how do I make it better for them in the gym? And I know we're going to talk about that, but that was like one of my first things that popped in my head was, wow, this month I really went neural with the training, and they're super happy and they're not mad at me, right?
Right. Yeah.
And you can imagine you and I on these levels sometimes we're fourth, fifth, sixth peg, and I'm like, I wonder how those guys above me are feeling with this guy's same attitude. So
Yeah.
that when you talk about digestion plus other things like that was one of the first key things, and I'm glad that you have a system and then that I've started adopting as well over the last bunch of years that now we have actually, as you said, metrics and things to look at. So if you work with somebody like that, Dustin, I know there's a lot, I can't pin it on one thing that you do, but after you get the assessment, how do you go about talking to that client or um, introducing that? Because as you can imagine, if they're a CEO, they're balls to the wall. Those guys are used to being pushed hard. What is your strategy regarding that? Sometimes, honestly, in my case, I kind of would just like, yeah, we'll get to it. And I kind of would and that was maybe in my earlier days where I didn't have as much confidence in it and whatever. So I would just do it, and then it helped him. How did you
Yeah.
figure out how to do that with your clients?
Yeah. Failing
Yeah,
for the
fair,
most part.
fair.
Yeah. How did I figure that out? Yeah, I failed. And then I thought, well, how do you do this better? But to your point, when you're dealing with people who say, this is what I want, they're very clear about what they want.
Of course, which is
All right.
nice. Yep.
And then they're also often very clear about what they think they need to do. And one of the things that I've heard, probably the line I've heard most frequently from clients over the past 25 years has been, well, I know what to do, I just don't do it.
Mhm.
And that's the general line I hear. If you're listening and you've used it, we're all works in progress. Okay. I've done it too. Doesn't make you a bad person. We're all working to be better.
Yep.
But that to me is that's us being humans, and that's us saying, hey, I know what to do here, I just don't do it. In a lot of cases, they probably know how to do things better than they're doing. I would agree with that, right?
Fair. Yep.
Okay, but that's often not the issue. The issue is often that what they think they need to do is short term okay, but medium long term, and to address all of the things they don't see, not viable.
Yep.
And so their body doesn't allow them to do it. So one of the things that is very popular, I'm going to take a bit of a detour to a medium-sized driveway for a moderately sized house here for you. But you think about the industry around detoxification.
Hmm.
And into the late 70s and early 80s, detox was not even something that was in the layperson's vernacular. I mean, detox was like heavy drugs, right?
Yep. Yep.
And there's a definite need for that. It's not until the 90s really do we see in 2000s, like with the fit influencer culture, do we see, hey, I'm gonna do a quick detox. And really what that meant for most people was eating vegetables, drinking
Yes.
them in a powder or a can, and not eating or drinking alcohol, or eating greasy and fatty food, and then drinking alcohol, and then taking some supplements that were going to help me feel spring fresh. The reality is your body in its natural process of detoxification, and perhaps we can talk about this next time, is
Yep.
working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's not a dance. Your body doesn't need you to do a detox for it to work. It
Sure.
doesn't
Hmm.
unlock that way. Um, and that's a good thing, because if human beings were not set to autonomically detoxify, I mean, you'd be dead in an afternoon.
You would.
I mean, you forget to take your buns out of the oven, you're dead, right? So the body does this naturally, but our marketing and our advertising and our language around this in the industry has done a really good job of getting people to think, well, I need to do a detox. And really what they're saying is, I want to feel better and I want to lose some weight. Okay. I want to reduce some water retention from inflammation. I want to maybe not feel so inflamed. I want some antioxidants on board, right? I want these things. And they're trying in their own language to communicate respectfully, like toddlers, in a very incomplete, sometimes with anger, of I want this.
Yes.
And so our job as practitioners in many cases is to listen to what they're actually telling you they want, and then identify the things that are stopping them from achieving it.
Yep.
And then this is the key: reframing it to things that are achievable. And what we want to do is we want to focus on actions and taking intentions and converting them to actions, and then evaluating the effect those actions have on how we feel.
Amazing.
If we focus on the outcome, fat loss, you're going to fail. If you focus on, okay, my limiting factor here is I'm eating foods I'm having a hard time digesting. My digestion is not supported. I'm overtraining in the gym and I'm not sleeping well. And we get people into a position where we put easier to digest foods, we help them digest, we pull the stress, you do low intensity steady state, or you use a neurological program instead of like a metabolic program and by neurological, what I mean is there's more time between your sets,
Definitely.
right? You're focused more on taxing the nervous system and its ability to hold heavier loads. So it's strength training, right? And
Yep.
that can have a great effect on reducing the volume, reducing the time under tension for people, the length of time they're training, the total stress load. And so when you do that by improving food and reducing the stress load and supporting them in a way where they're recovering, it's their inputs and outputs are a little more balanced.
Yep.
Okay. And we do that long enough, repeat it long enough. Well, now what we're doing is building new habits. This is what we call habit stacking, right? You take an intention, you convert it to an action, you repeat that action long enough that it becomes a habit, and you establish these new habits whereby the person's digesting better, they're training better, they're recovering better, and they feel better.
Yep.
And in doing that, they get buy-in. And so for anyone who's had frustration over saying, well, a program worked for me, but when I stopped doing it, it stopped working. It's like, well, no, it still works. It just wasn't something sustainable for you long term. The way you're approaching this by saying, let's pull back, let's look at which of your visceral systems are not optimal right now or above 80%.
Yep.
What's your goal? How is your training? How do your orthopedics look? And let's chart a plan here. Okay, let's chart a plan to help you see where we are and where we're going. And to answer your question, after circling that long driveway, to help people understand that, what I began doing was laying out 6 and 24-month processes, saying, here's what the next
Mhm.
6 months is going to look like for you. And in general, it takes people about 2 years to go through that process of optimizing all their systems, starting to overcome blocking factors, doing it long enough that it becomes habits. And it's kind of like getting a master's degree in yourself, because what you start to understand is, well, here's what my tongue looks like when my digestion's about to go south, or here's how this feels when my stress is too high and I'm about to get sick or have an IBS, a bout of IBS, and how I need to adjust things in the gym or the diet or the supplements to help me deal with that. It gives them indicators, much like you had said before, what you look for in your car. Before you run out of gas, you want to see your gas light go on. When it's time for an oil change, you want to, right? And so what
Yep.
we're doing with these metrics, Brian, is we're just giving that person their indicator lights on their dashboard. Here's
Sure.
your lights. Here's what they mean. And when you see them, here's what you do. And that's what Program Delta is. It's starting them with the evaluation. Here's your tools. Here's what the next 6 months, 12 months, 24 months are going to look like for you. And when you come out the other side, you're going to look better. You're going to feel better. And also, and this is the hidden toy at the bottom of the box for most people, if you
Okay.
have kids and they're genetically similar to you, you're also learning a way to communicate to them how they can then also apply this information to them, because they're going to have a lot of the same issues that you are. Right. So it's equipping you generationally to be able to make impact and improve your bloodline. So that's
Okay.
how I handle it. You're welcome to handle it another way, but I'd love to get your notes on it. But that's how I've approached that idea of, hey, I just want to train and push hard and get fat loss and get huge in the next 6 to 12 weeks versus, hey, here's what you really need to do. So not only you get that result, but you feel better while you're doing it.
Well, I guess you can see it from the same aspects as me because you actually work with your hands-on with your clientele a lot because you can, right? With acupuncture and all that type of stuff too.
Mhm.
So you get to see the pieces that are missing, right? Whatever it may be, musculoskeletal. I know, like, remember me telling you when we first met, I was working with the, IFM doctor. So he did acupuncture. And
Yeah.
there's times when I started having my children, not just one, but then on the four that he started, and you can, he would start putting like, all you need to do is calm down. Like I go laid in his office and he put needles like around here in my neck because I was so stressed, right? I didn't feel
Yeah.
it, but he could see it. And like, it was kind of funny. He'd feel it in my
Hmm.
traps. And so what I like to do is I have a set of skills just like you, and my skills are fit a certain thing. And so what's been going on over these last 13 years of me creating program Delta is as you the same with you. I have not fixed everybody. I hate using that term anyways, but I've helped a lot of people finding the one thing that was keeping them from moving forward. And in all reality, as you know, typically people who are already in the gym environment, it's probably not it could be how they're doing the training, which is what we were discussing a lot today, and I'm sure we'll discuss a lot more. But make them in that process, they realize, oh, I actually do feel better doing it this way. So when you and I are talking about neural compared to metabolic stimulus, like, yes, it bores them for a little bit, you know, three,
Yeah.
4, 5 months I've had them on that. And then the longer they feel so much better, I go, oh, now we can do this metabolic stimulus or the muscle building stimulus that, like you said, I don't have those tools that you have, but I've gotten to use some other ones. And it's been such a great thing for me to show them that gets them on a better level. And so
Yeah.
with the biometric coaching that we'll finish up talking here shortly, but moving from energy to digestion, then to next where we'll talk about detox. Like you said, a lot of people go and
Yeah.
throw it into, oh, I'm going to go on a detox. Well, you're detoxing every day, guys. So how do you
Yeah.
keep that up? And what you'll talk about next time, and because you have a lot of knowledge on that, you actually are the one who taught me a lot more on that, is that you can't ramp up one phase compared to the other. It really has to be a nice flow, right? And that's where the detoxes you see in Cosmo or all that, that's kind of where they'll go. They went wrong. We'll go into detail about that later. But this is kind of the conversations I'm having with my clientele, not in the depth that we're talking about here. But the cool thing is I like to call my company now more of an education company, right?
Yeah.
If that makes any sense. And not a training company. Yes, I use weight training as a tool, but I want to call it an education company because that is what, at least the people that have done the best with me, either be an athlete, I'm working with a guy with an ACL right now, or a 65-year-old woman who's, who wanted to just get in better shape. So if
Right.
you have anything to finish up, any notes you got for a minute or two, and then we'll kind of part ways and we'll come back next week and talk detox.
You want a comment from me? I mean, that's like
Sure.
asking a fish if it likes water, Brian.
Ah,
Uh,
good point. Good point.
so a couple of things about that real quick.
Yep.
I agree with you that the education component is really important.
Yep.
And I love the way you said that personally. I think you're doing a great job with that.
Thank you.
And what we want to be able to do with people is give them information that can fit in the magazine smart group and not require to deal with the book smart group. So those are two different people. The book smart people in this industry do what we do. Like we nerd out on it, but the most people, they want it Reader's Digest version. And so that's the performance art. And
Yes.
along that line, I'm going to give you a transitional point, is you just said something really important about stress. So let's talk about stress and detox for a moment for ahead of our next conversation.
Yep.
When you talk about that doc working on points in this area from an acupuncture standpoint, okay, and you'll have people doing EFT work and tapping, right? You have energy work, people saying, well, this is your communications chakra. What's interesting about this is that we have, when we think about being calm versus being stressed, stressed feels hypoxic
Yes.
or hyperventilating. We don't have enough oxygen. We have too much carbon dioxide. Okay. And our secondary respiratory muscles through the scalenes and the traps, when we stop breathing and we get shallow breath, we get tight. Now, there's different reasons we
Mm,
think evolutionarily this happens. Maybe we were quadrupeds at some point and we were trying to protect our neck because we're super vulnerable right here, right? And
hmm.
we elevate and that shortens our secondary respiration muscles. So that reduces our oxygen and increases our carbon dioxide.
Okay.
So giving us 2-minute meditations, right? Where we're able to, and that's really the biggest prize at the bottom of the meditation box is that it's a massive exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide in a very short period of time. Okay, so you don't have to wear silk robes and shake a dead chicken over your head and try to communicate with your ancestors. It's not ethereal. Some people can say it can be. It's not ethereal. I mean, this is just basic biochemistry and
Yeah.
understanding that when you inhale through the nose and you exhale through the mouth, and when you do this and you actually focus on relaxing the body and moving through respiration, moving those muscles, you get an oxygen exchange. And what happens for people is when they're slightly hypoxic, they are going to feel more agitated, more desperate, more frenetic, right? When we increase their oxygen, they feel more calm, more still, more relaxed, right? They're breathing more slowly. And so, one of the things that we want to do when we think about stress is we want to think about increasing oxygen and we want to think about reducing oxidation and carbon dioxide. And that's where the discussion of detoxification comes in because there is a quite a bit of free radical scavenging that needs to take place through that detoxification process. There's quite a bit of involvement with our ability to have our lungs and our kidneys and our liver all communicate, right, and balance out our oxygen levels and our stress levels. And also, and this is the thing for next week, we want to talk a little bit also about nitric oxide and its ability to help keep all of our vessels open and that blood flowing so we don't feel so physically tense.
Okay.
Okay, so detoxification is something that we don't have to buy a tea to do. It does it all the time, but it is correlated to stress, and we don't need to meditate to talk to our ancestors, but we should do it to help keep ourselves calm and not hypoxic. So let's talk
Well,
maybe about that next week. because that's an important discussion for people.
I think that's a nice bridge into next week. And I think this will be a very informative because that part for maybe more of the female clientele, just because they might read that in other places, as we discussed a couple minutes ago. But to get an actual, the physiological reason to do that. And, as you've
Yeah,
discussed with me, something I didn't know when I learned detox years ago, training is about that. Training helps with detoxification process and all that type of stuff, right? So,
absolutely. Lymphatic
so
drainage and movement. Fat loss is detox. Detox is fat loss. Right.
good. All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Dustin, for today. Thanks for all the
Yeah.
knowledge and look forward to speaking with you next week.
Oh, absolutely. It's my pleasure. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks.